Welcome to the podcast. This is What's Your Story Africa. My name is Anthony Mwangi. Thank you so much for making time to tune in today. We have yet another enlightening conversation about the economic transformation of our beautiful country, Kenya. And with us is our guest, who's no stranger to this podcast. We appreciate the insights, the knowledge, just the enriching information he shares with us to just open up our minds and get to understand how we can all play a part in moving this country forward. His name is Anthony Mwangi. He's the CEO of Visible Industries Limited. He is a co-founder at Chipu Center. He's also a director of Pinemark Company Limited, as well as sits on the boards of different companies and government institutions here in Kenya and, of course, the Greater Africa region. Public policy expert, Mr. Anthony Mwangi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Catherine.
You look brilliant in black and white.
Thank you.
This should be your wardrobe now going forward.
Thank you, Catherine.
You look like one of those men in black movies, huh?
It's intentional.
It's intentional. No, I mean, I'm so happy you made time. And of course, in these studios, we shall be letting you know more about where we are, where we're recording this podcast. And we are also just very grateful to CMX for just giving us this studio space to have this conversation, and we'll be expounding more on that. But with Anthony today, we want to have a conversation on economic transformation, specifically for our beloved country, Kenya. And one of the reasons we have this now is something that happened last week, where we got another visionary paper, if I may call it that, by one of our very, very honorable, learned, senior, academic leaders in this country. That is His Excellency Professor Nyong'o. And and I think a team released a paper called Road to Singapore. And it got us thinking, we've had such visionary papers in this country since independence, 60 years, literally. And you've mentioned a couple of them in our previous podcasts. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. We've discussed the Better Plan. We've discussed the 1963 Sessional Paper or something, and we compare that to South Korea, to be specific. We discussed Vision 2030. We've discussed quite a number of them. At least I remember those top of mind. And now, behold, we have a sixth one.
Yes.
So help us understand, first of all, even before we start to just break the sixth one down, what are the five we've had, the historical context therein, and what have they brought us to the table for us to say, oh, we need a sixth one?
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you for having me. It has been a while since we met. And as you've mentioned, it was quite interesting to see our leading scholars, Professor Nyong'o, people that we really, really respect, Professor Michael Shege, Professor Kanyinga, and the team, just looking at what do we need to do. But I think this question has been asked, as you've said, from independence. Mm-hmm. And I think the first document that we saw, or we've read about, because we were not there, is the Sessional Paper No. 10 of 1965.
Okay.
And that was very profound because of where Kenya was coming from. Because Kenya was coming from the colonial Kenya, independence in 1963, and therefore they needed to come up with their own strategy, and they called it African Socialism. Okay, and the application of that in economic planning. Mm-hmm. Remember, during the colonial period, there were a lot of imbalances. Okay, mm-hmm. A lot of ownership of land, enterprises was in the hands of the British. Mm-hmm. So this strategy was to correct the imbalances that were there. Okay, and one of the main things that you've read in books and you've read in that strategy. Mm-hmm. was in manufacturing especially, was import substitution.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That means the things that we were importing, we wanted to start making them locally. Mm-hmm. All right? So they created They mapped out some of these industries. That's why they came up with East African industries. Later came to Unilever, East African breweries, East African Airways. All this was to make sure that we produce, although airline maybe a step aside, but all these were to make sure that whatever we're importing, we were able to make ourselves.
Okay.
And they created tariff walls to protect those industries. Right? There's been a lot of criticism, of course. All these projects have criticism, but we are coming from a very low base. Remember, at that time, there were no hospitals for the locals. There were no schools. So the Sessional Paper number 10 was brilliant and brilliantly executed.
Okay.
By the time we were being born, because it was under active implementation, there were schools, there was ownership of land by locals, there were hospitals and dispensaries that were there, and you could start seeing even our grandfathers and our grandmothers were going to school. It was part of that strategy. Okay. So as children, and I found it happening in 1980s, we would go in the morning session, and then our grandfathers would go in the afternoon. And that was called the Gumbaru education. Okay. So it was kind of universal education for all. And remember, we were talking about, even the founding fathers were talking about the poverty, disease, and ignorance. Okay. All right? So those were the three things that they were fighting.
All right.
There are people who have criticized it. They said they concentrated on high productive areas. And that's how, Mount Kenya, Central Kenya, got a bit, lion's share because of the starting to grow coffee, tea, and all those products. And then, fast forward, of course, the first regime came to an end in 1978. Then we had a KANU regime. Oh, that was also a KANU regime, anyway. That's the second president.
Yeah.
And in 1986, there was another visionary document. Okay? In 1986, called Sessional Paper number 1 of 1986.
So let me just interrupt your train of thought,
Yes.
which I rarely do, but
Yes.
This one is very personal. So the 1965 was Sessional Paper number 10.
10.
So why is the one in 1986 number 1?
I don't know how they labeled it number 1.
Okay.
Or why they started with Sessional Paper number 10. I have not looked at that history. Just
Okay.
looked at the document.
All right.
Let's assume there is a science behind that.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
There must be a science behind that.
Uh-huh.
But at 1986, the country was, remember, we have come from import substitution, protection of organizations or industries that were created. So you have tariff walls to make sure that they survive by protecting them. Then the IMF World Bank came with the structural adjustment programs.
Okay.
Right? And the main thing of structural adjustment programs was to open up the market, liberalize the market. All right? Government was from 1965, that paper 65 was very entrenched in the production themselves, in business. Government was in business. But they're still going to IMF World Bank, and they say, look, we need to come up with another plan. So the structural adjustment programs were instituted by those Bretton Woods institutions. Okay? Now, the Sessional Paper number 1 of 1980s was to pivot from, because of that change. All right? You're liberalizing the market. You're removing the price controls. Government was controlling the price of sugar and price of this and price of unga. So they were told, stop doing that. So that paper was now to pivot from there. How do we operate in that environment? Okay. Very, very disruptive. Not very well prepared, not very well implemented. And then there was another one, Sessional Paper number 2 of 1997. Okay. And then 203. Right? Now the regime has changed. We have Kibaki in power. And surprisingly, Professor Nyong'o was also part of the team that came up with the economic recovery strategy for job and wealth creation. Okay, that is another visionary document in 2003. Now, this was a complete reset because at that time the economy was doing very badly. I think the GDP growth was around 2%. Sometimes it had gone even to negative growth. Okay, this was a complete reset. And the ERS, what they call ERS 2003, Economic Recovery Strategy, is a precursor to another visionary document called Vision 2030. All right? In 2008, after the whatever election dispute that was there in 2007. Right. But you can see the golden era, and we can call the Kibaki regime the 10 years golden era.
Okay.
It was the economy just, shot up. The jobs were created. We started seeing big ticket, development. The revenue collection jumped from 200 billion to almost $1 trillion. So we saw quite massive. Yes, we came from a very low base, but we went all the way to growth 7%, 8% year on year. So that was really a golden age. And therefore, we can say that ERS and the Vision 2030, there was a very good follow-through, okay, and implementation, okay? That's how we got into the socio-political pillars and economic pillars. We had, education, free primary school education, that now brought a lot of kids who are not going to school. They started going to school. We can say that was a success. There was a political that culminated into actually getting the Constitution 2010. That was a success, all right? On the economic front, of course, there are so many things that we can tick the boxes about the success of on economic front. Yeah. So, again, another visionary document. But there's a bit of a difference. The first 10 years from 65, actually almost 20 years from 1965 to 1986, the execution was good because the economy was actually growing, all right? There was a bit of from the coup of 82 and all the way to the 90s, there was a bit of a turmoil economically.
Right.
Then reset in 2003 to 2013. That is now when, again, we came to another regime, that is Uhuru Ruto 1. Okay? And we saw, again, the implementation of the Constitution. They were the first one to implement the Constitution. We didn't have devolution. So, as much as we criticize a lot of the things that the regime did, it was fundamentally different from Kibaki regime.
In what way?
Kibaki did not have the constitutional offices. Kibaki did not have the burden of the devolution, if we can call it the burden of devolution, because this is almost 15% of the revenue cut off, from the central government to go and finance the counties. And I'm not saying that is wrong, but Kibaki did not have the burden for that. Kibaki could work with President Kibaki, God rest his soul in eternal peace. So he did not need to deal with a lot of court cases. At that time, we didn't have a liberal constitution that gave people a lot of these bills of rights. So the executive orders could work. So from 2013, President Uhuru and his deputy, they suffered quite a bit because you don't have a carte blanche to do what you want. So you have to walk through you're implementing a new constitution, you're creating the devolution, which was not there, but they implemented it, all right? So we need to give the credit where it's due. And then from there, the regime, for 5 years, then we got into the Big Four. That's 2017, another visionary document, all right? The Big Four. Big Four had manufacturing, had housing, universal healthcare, had food, and nutrition, food security and nutrition, agriculture,
Okay.
So very detailed plan, because I've seen the Big Four. And the challenge that we got in that is that they did not carry through the execution, how the execution was being done by the Kibaki regime. So they dropped some institutions. The institutions were not given the prominence or the importance that they had, because there was 2030 Secretariat, there was NESC, that were kind of accountability institutions that were coordinating the government across the board. So the Vision 2030 Secretariat remained. It was disempowered. NESC was disbanded. Did not happen. And I think that is one of the areas. And you can see even from Nyong'o Plan, Professor Nyong'o Plan, they're recommending the same execution layer of having those accountability institutions like NESC.
What does NESC stand for?
NESC stood for the National Economic and Social Council. Okay. Had global leaders who had a lot of experience. You know, leaders from Europe like Baroness Lina Choka. We had Victor Ko from Singapore. We had a professor from Japan. So they were sounding boards of very ideas that the team was coming up with. Okay?
Cool.
And meshing their experience, global experience, with what Kenya was doing.
Okay.
And you can see that is the level of those individuals is not an echo chamber, you know, where you say what, because they don't need to say what President Kibaki wanted. And then there was consistent in terms of chairing of, or meeting of NESC. So there was strong accountability, you know, in execution.
Right.
2013 to 2022, that disappeared in terms of accountability. So you have everybody who has been appointed by the president. You have Presidential Delivery Unit, and I did a lot of work with that. Those became the advisory, you know, committees. You know, they have no budget. They have no responsibility. They have no authority over ministries. So the ministries can do whatever they want, and these guys became just running around picking the projects and what the ministries are doing. All right. And then now the Better Plan. Better Plan in 2023 is a replica of Big Four.
Okay.
Because it has housing, it has universal health, it has agriculture. The only thing it didn't have explicitly was manufacturing, but they talked about value addition.
Okay.
So it is same.
Okay.
Right? And while this Uhuru time they had a presidential delivery unit, Better has what they call the Presidential Economic Transformation Secretariat.
Okay, PETS.
PETS.
Okay.
All right? Which is also an advisory body. All right? And I think if you look at what Professor Nyong'o and team have recommended, and that is what has been lacking for 60 years. It's not a visionary problem. It's not a problem of strategy. It is a problem of execution. All right? You have a good plan, but your execution layer is very weak. So if you look at those documents from 1965 to 2026, and unfortunately, I'll have to maybe put a bit of criticism to the people I respect greatly, is that we don't have a diagnosis problem. All those plans from 1965 have always got the prognosis right. Ignorance, diseases, that's why Universal Health Care and SHA is talking about diseases, you know, and poverty.
Yeah.
Right? And you can be able to look at that and say, so why is it that we have all these great plans, but you continue operating suboptimally? Because we were off the blocks in 1963. Yeah, if you look at, so we've had those plans, you know, good plans. And you can tell a golden thread, you know, all of them. The diagnosis is the same, or prognosis is the same. The challenges are the same. You can be able to trace about entrepreneurship from 1965, ownership, production, You can be able to see the MSME in it. Manufacturing is on all of them. Whether you call it manufacturing or industrialization is nomenclature, it is semantics. So all those documents from 65 to 2026, the same difference, as I say.
Yeah.
So what is the problem? Because we can say we have done very well. And Kenyans, we want to say we have done very well. But let's also look at what others have done. In those 1960s, South Korea was coming from a devastating war, what do they call the Korean Peninsula War.
Okay.
All right? Where the peninsula was divided into two, South and North. So Japanese, when they lost war, all right, the Second World War, they handed over North to Russians and South to Americans.
Okay.
So same people, same language, family networks were divided into two. All right? But let's focus on South because we were at the same, in fact, we were at a better place. All right? Because you see, for us, the transition, yes, there was war, Mamawi and all that, but there was a smooth transition. Then, because of the war, South Korea was devastated. The peninsula was devastated. And the story is given that, we actually gave aid
To who?
to South Korea in 1960. Those early 60s. Okay? So they were actually doing worse. I worked for a South Korean company.
Okay.
And they did not forget to remind us that we are the same, we are doing better than them.
Wow. Kenya.
Yes. All right? 60 years later, they are in $1.7 trillion economy, while we are at 10% of them. Okay. So there must be a difference how they were able to scale all the way to that level of growth. That's one. China was coming even from a worse position. Remember, if you remember your history on the big leap forward by Chairman Mao Zedong, and then there was cultural, revolution of China. So they didn't want all these Western democracy and ideals and what they call bourgeoisie dominance.
Yeah.
And he wanted what they call proletariat because he was a student of Stalin. All right?
Okay.
So in 1966, they came, I think it was May, they instituted what they call cultural revolution. And cultural revolution was to discard anything that looked like Western and people to go back to the farms. Okay? And he used students to cramp on anyone else. They called it the Red Army. They had a red book. You have to, that was your Bible. University were closed. They pushed everybody, and it was bloody. They pushed everybody to the farm. All right?
Okay.
Everybody. So between 1966 and when he died in 1976 or 78 there, almost, many millions of Chinese were devastated by famine, drought, hunger. Many of them died. Okay? So we are here in mid-1960s, actually to the late 1970s now, when Chairman Mao died, and the gentleman called Deng Xiaoping took over. Kenya that time, we have JKIA, we have all these, including the UN.
Wow.
China is coming from devastating, economy. Until they said a reset button by Deng Xiaoping and how they are going to Now you can say from 1980, their strategy started working in 1980. 1980 to 2020, they eliminated, at that time in 1990, the extreme poverty in China was over 80%. Extreme poverty. What we call here abject poverty. All right? Which has never gone down. Never gone down. But Chinese by 2019, 2020, they eliminated 100% extreme poverty. China has removed people, hundreds of millions of people, from abject poverty to prosperity. That means their strategy worked. Korean strategy worked. Let's look at Vietnam.
Okay.
When we were growing up, we were actually watching these movies from Saigon. All right?
Yeah.
And the war ended in mid-70s. So they started their strategies again in 1980s. Kenya is already way ahead. There are dispensaries in every village. We had a village dispensary ourselves. We had a doctor, where teachers were going to school. These guys had come from a devastating American-Vietnamese war. The whole place has been destroyed. It looks like slums, all right? By war. People have not gone to school. But from 1980 to where they are now, they are almost 5 times our economy. So what is this thing that they did that was able to uplift them again out of poverty? If you go to Vietnam, a country that started rebuilding in 80, almost 20 years after ourselves, we had a long run of almost 20 years.
Yeah.
They are way ahead of us. So the toolbox for coming up with new visionary, with all due respect to our professors, the toolbox is full. We don't need any other visionary document. We don't need.
Those are 6 you mentioned from
Those are 6
1965.
documents. The one for 2026 is a 6th visionary document.
Yeah.
Strategy.
6th.
Yes.
And you have said the issue is not, what did you say? The issue is not the prognosis.
It's not the diagnosis.
It's not the diagnosis.
Yes.
It is execution.
Yes.
So my question would be, who is meant to execute? And you've sat in these rooms where these papers are created, brainstorm. You have contributed, actually. If I may throw it back to you, you have contributed to the creation of these visionary documents, some of them. So who is meant to bring this to life? Because a paper is it's dead tree.
If you look at what we have lacked as a country, is that execution, firm execution layer. We have had successful governments over and over. But what they do is to rebrand the previous vision. So, Big Four is a rebrand of Vision 2030. Actually, they call it MTP3, Medium Term Plan 3. So better is MTP Plan 4. So it is a cutaway from Vision 2030, but with a lot of rebranding. All right? And a lot of veering off from the original, Vision 2030.
Right.
But even the Vision 2030 itself, while it achieved what it achieved within those 10 years, it had so many projects, flagship projects. I think the last time I checked, had only over 200 flagship projects. But if you look at what Chinese did, what Koreans did, what Vietnamese did, they focused on very few select flagships, strategies, and executed completely to the end. The South Korea, while we talked about import substitution, they talked about export orientation. Okay? And they said, we are going to focus on exports. And they took up their big organizations and they pushed them. I told you the story of not Daewoo, the story of Hyundai,
Yes.
the Samsung, the Hyundais, the Daewoo, the LGs were given the state instruments and protection and incentives, but monitored and conditional to export. And they were not allowed to do things for domestic market.
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
We were given those incentives. If you don't meet the export quota, those incentives are removed and someone else is given.
Okay.
So those shibboleths, what they call shibboleths, had no choice other than to export. When I came to university, many years later, the entire hi-fi system, TV, white goods in terms of microwave ovens and fridges were all Japanese. So Sony was a big hit. While we were in college, I mean, if you don't have a Sony, and then we had JVC, we had Sanyo, we had all this.
Yeah.
When you went to Thuli Avenue, you went to buy a Sony. The TVs were the same. Fast forward, Koreans now they dominate the world in both hi-fi, in TV section, in white goods. White goods are microwave ovens, fridges and all that. How do they do it? They could have chose to go to smaller distributors and start doing things and compete with Japanese.
Yeah.
But they decided to knock on the doors of the Japanese major distributors all over the world.
Oh.
And they were thrown out many times because their products were not at the level of Japanese. They reverse engineered until they got better than
Japanese.
If you guys, you're not as old, Gold Star,
That's a pair of
those were the precursors of LG and Samsung,
Cool.
Nobody wanted to touch it.
Cool stuff.
But the rebranding was done and now they are the dominant in the world. But the orientation was that we are going to be exporters. Our import substitution gave tariff barriers or walls to these big companies, but they never exported. They never outgrew. They focused on domestic market. And even if you look at these companies today, some of them, including some of the companies I've worked with, they have not left even the local market for smaller SMEs. Because the big companies are supposed to be focusing on
exports.
And then you graduate the smaller companies to start doing things for the local market.
Yeah.
So I think that fundamentally is what has affected us. So there was no follow-through. So a new regime comes, rebrands, does something else. A new regime comes, rebrands, does something else. And now we are hearing, even when you hear the political market, and I call it political market because in a political market, anything goes.
Yeah.
Anybody can say anything. Now the ones who are saying they are alternative, they're also saying, once we come in, we remove the housing, a program. So it means you remove SHA, you removed NHIF, you put SHA, these other ones, if they happen to, they remove SHA, they go back to NHIF. This convolution is what has led us to be where we are. So the development, if you are dispassionate about whichever regime we are talking about, has been more about leaders, not about the Kenyans. It's about my vision.
Yeah.
I didn't like your vision, so I'm putting my vision. All right? But the Chinese have followed through. Chinese is a one-party state.
Okay.
But you see, there's been very good transition between, other than Chairman Mao, who was completely on a different tangent, but Deng Xiaoping, all the way to Hu Jintao and others, to Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
They are following the same strategy.
Wait,
same strategy.
They didn't change? They don't change per the administration?
They progress what is there.
Wow.
All right?
Wow.
They accelerate what has been done.
Right.
And that's what I gave you also an example of Malaysia, how the Kuala Lumpur used Nairobi master plan and they innovated around it over and over and over. If you look at Vietnam, or let's look at South Korea. South Korea, sequencing, and they had what they call economic planning board that had actually the mandate, budget mandate, and cross coordination of government ministries in terms of looking at how execution is done. They have the mandate. Vision 2030 Secretary did not have any mandate. PDU did not have any mandate. You know, it is an advisory unit.
Right.
It is a note, guys who come and collect notes and put in slides. You know, right? And I think the same with pets. I mean, you know. So the South Koreans sequence, they said, we are going to be export oriented. We are going to start with light industries. That's why the wigs, even the wigs here are done by Koreans.
Hey,
right?
This hair.
Yeah, that's how they became very big in wigs. All right? But there's also something that they said, we are going to be food sufficient. So they started with rice in 1960. By 1980s, they were fully sufficient, self-sufficient. All right? We can mirror that and see these are some of the things that we could have started, but we don't have a coherent strategy. And then we have so many of these projects we want to do everything at the same time. The Chinese focused on special economic zones that only 3 of them, yeah? There is, if I can remember, Shenzhen, Xiamen, and another one. All of them are the coast. Okay? All of them. And they said, finish one, give it the best incentives, define it as even as if it's outside the country, give it what they need, give them power, give them customs, you know, what they need to attract investments. Okay? When you're done with one, we go to the next one. We don't go to Dongokundu, we go to Naivasha, you go to Kaips, we are all over. All right? And that's why the problem that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do not follow through.
It reminds me of is it a proverb? A rolling stone gathers no moss. You know, you're rolling everywhere.
Yeah.
And
yeah. No wonder we are in a situation where now the unemployment is hitting for the young people over 80%. Over 87% of the jobs are informal. These are not sustainable jobs. Our jobs have remained at 3 million. And I think the measurement for jobs should be payee, not statistics that you cannot verify. The jobs that we report should be the jobs that have a tax on it. They're paying pay. All right? Vietnamese, what they did, they came up with a strategy called Doi Moi. Renovate or innovate. Let's not go boiling oceans. Let's look at what we are doing, we innovate. What others are doing, we innovate, and we renovate what we have. Wow. And they went for textile as one of their. All right? And maybe when we come to sectors, then you can see what Bangladesh have done, what Vietnamese have done.
Yeah.
All right? So my view is that if we are to make sense of all these visionary documents that are actually similar, I mean, there's no difference. They are the same. And that's also the same difference, right? What we need now is no more visionary documents. No more stories. Execute. How do we execute? You have an execution layer that has a cross coordination across the ministry. And actually, you have the budget. They have an eye on the budget and they're controlling the budget. All right? Otherwise, you can't. If you're just on the peripheral, begging the ministries to provide information, you'll not make it. And then you have monthly, and you have to create metrics. For instance, you say it is jobs, jobs, jobs.
Yeah.
Then we'll now look at sectors That, and maybe that metrics will come and see what, as we go down.
Yeah.
We say, let's have a prioritization matrix that prioritizes the jobs. Okay? And we'll do it in 3 ways.
Okay.
The first category is jobs. Which sector has the biggest potential of creating jobs?
Right.
And jobs here, we're not talking about 100. We have to talk about thousands.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands, because you have millions of people who are looking for jobs.
Yeah.
So jobs, jobs, jobs. And then you look at the sectors and you say speed to fast job. That if we touch this sector and focus on this, double down on this sector, you categorize them in terms of prioritizing which sector will be the first, with the fastest, the speed to fast job. For us to, you see, public support is finite. All right? Public support will only happen in any new regime maximum of 1 to 2 years.
Okay.
If they don't see things happening very fast, that public confidence will start waning, and you can see where we are today. Because if you focus on a sector that can create 1 million jobs in 15 years, nobody will wait for that. It doesn't matter how good you package.
Yeah.
So you have to look at, and my own view is that we create a framework that focus on jobs, because that's where the challenge is.
Yes.
You know, whatever industry, you can move back and say jobs, jobs, jobs. So you're looking at the sectors that have potential of creating hundreds of thousands of jobs.
Right.
Okay? Then you put that again and say, okay, we can create these jobs in 20 years. Nobody's going to wait for that. Say, okay, let's now put another axis here. Speed to the fast job.
Okay.
What are some of the things that you can do? And within 12 to 18 months, people can start seeing. And then you say, what is the capital intensity that is required to make this work? Because if you need 100 billion, if you need 1 trillion, then of course you don't have it because of the budget constraint. And when you do very, very good prioritization metrics based on this, you'll get agri at the primary production, all right, on the common things that we found.
Yeah.
You land on textile, and maybe we'll come to that. You land on leather, right? And you can digital, for the young people. So you execute on this without getting into so many projects. All right? It is very hard to execute, to do that, because for the politician, you want to be everywhere in 47 counties doing small things, but nothing big that is national.
Yeah.
All right? So it is important at that point now to have the public themselves understand what the regime is doing, so that then you have public support, that you cannot be executing this across the county, the country.
Yeah. But
the impact will go across the country.
Yes.
All right?
Yeah.
So I believe what the thesis is, as you've said, no more strategy. Let us now have an execution. Let us institutionalize execution. Not new ministry, all right? Not new advisory board, committee, advisory committee. It is purely an institution that has visibility on the budget. They have the sequencing of these projects, so that ministries are not doing their thing and running and saying, this is what we're doing.
Right.
The right putting the money where the mouth is. If you look at the budget, 2026-2027 budget, and you look at the big ticket items that have been, allocated budget, you will see that education takes the lion's share. Okay? Over 700 billion. But look at that in terms of developing human resource. And look at where the human resource is going. Industrialization was given 16 billion. Okay? 16.9 to be precise. All right? So you are putting, and I'm not saying it's wrong, it's only that there is misalignment. Because you're training all these young Kenyans, but the amount of money you're putting in creating these jobs for them is underfunded. Actually, prisons department got 42 billion. Industrialization got 16. So there's a bit of a problem there. Because it seems we could be preparing these young people to go to prison, Security got almost 570, 600 billion.
What?
In totality. All right? Whether it is a military, whether it's the police, whether it's NIS. But if you look at where is really the risk? The risk is the jobs for the young people.
Yeah.
Not external incursions, not... The biggest threat that you have is internal.
Yes.
It's because there is no economic activities for the young people.
Hence, they'll commit crime and then go to prisons.
I mean, you saw June 2024, what happened, across the country. So if I was doing the prioritization, I would put the 500 billion on creating jobs.
Yeah.
Right?
My goodness, yes.
And much less in security. I mean, look.
Because when they're busy, engaged, innovating, creating,
they
building,
have a stake.
They
have a stake.
They own it.
Yeah.
So you never have to deal with things like crime and, and riots and protests.
Minimize. You can never eliminate some of those, but you'll grossly get out of from abject poverty.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think in the next 100 years for Kenya, it's about execution. Anybody who comes and give you a strategy, please just go back, take the 1965, take the 86, take the 97 document, take the ERS, take the 2030, take the better plan, take the big four, take now the latest of 2026, put them in a LLM model, in an AI model, and ask the right questions. You'll get the best document that nobody can develop from our good institutions.
So
you don't need 10 people.
No.
You need one person to put that in an LLM and ask the right questions. So the only thing that you need is to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Within the 10 minutes, you'll have your strategy.
And you don't need to pay a whole committee to come up
You do not need a group of... Because it's also, with a lot of due respect to our professors, those professors have taught students for the last 40 years. So I would have expected to see their students for over 40 years doing what they're doing. They did their job in 2000 by coming with ERS and Vision 2030. Let's also give an opportunity to the young people.
Yeah.
Because where we are headed is nobody has been there before.
Yeah.
We are in the age of information. We're in the age of AI. I was reading an article and I saw the president of South Korea hosting the CEO of NVIDIA, the CEO of Anthropic, the CEO of Broadcom, the CEO of OpenAI. And they've said, first of all, they left us a long time ago because of the execution. Now they are saying they are going to be an AI country. An AI country where they're talking about having a Korean own LLM, large language model. Those are the AI, large language model for the country. When I was working for Big Tech, we attempted to create what we called Kenya government cloud, private cloud infrastructure. Obviously, we are all these bureaucrats, non-tech bureaucrats, talking about security and all those. If you talk about AI today in Kenya, people start saying, oh, where is the policy on AI, blah, blah, data security. Data security has advanced thousandfold because of AI. It has not removed. So, you need one guy to put all those strategies in an LLM, in Claude, and give the instructions. Within 15 minutes, you'll get a better document than what the professors are giving us. I'm not sure they appreciate the amount of advancements that we have, the world has gone into. So we don't need people spending time coming up with new strategies.
Yeah.
We need to focus on executing, and we need to focus on creating the institutions for execution and sequencing and reporting, evidentially. I mean, the government of Rwanda goes to the public with all the ministers and say, tell us what you've done. And the public are allowed to ask questions.
Wow.
And the president is seated there. You don't go giving them stories.
No.
You don't go giving them stories. If it is Shah, for instance, you have people there, not politicians talking about Shah. That's not their job. It is the citizens talking about it.
Yeah.
Has it worked? It has not worked. It has not worked. Oh, if it is housing, if it is manufacturing, if it is MSMEs, you don't go say, you're not a political marketer. You call those SMEs to say, this is where we are and these are the challenges that you're dealing with them. So execution. And by the way, you don't lead, my view is that you do not leave the execution to a ministry.
Okay.
No, because ministries are not, ministries are in engineering, they are maintenance engineers. Something has broken, you fix it. All right? But not innovation, drivers. So if you're appointed as the PS, as a CS, deliver, if it is SEZ, have you delivered Naivasha Industrial or Special Economic Zone?
Right.
We have talked about Naivasha Economic Zone from 1997. It's not a new thing. It was in the document, Sessional Paper No. 2 of 1997. It is still, the last time we called and we said, let's give it the right nomenclature. This is still a cattle grazing field. I was there when we did the groundbreaking of Konza City under President Kibaki. It is still under construction.
What?
All right? That's how many years later? From 2003, maybe 2008 when they started. But you can see that regime moved very fast to acquire 5,000 acres of land from 3 different counties and create the infrastructure for that. So the vision was there. You can imagine the vision that was there when they actually decided to have their own undersea cable, broadband, digital backbone, connecting us to the world. Things that you could see. You can imagine the innovation of the explosion that you've seen with our motorbike economy. It is a policy issue. All right? How is it that we are not seeing big push innovations that create this kind of... Motorbikes have created over 2 million jobs. There are over 2 million, or actually going to 3 million people who are using motorbikes to earn a living.
Right.
You can imagine what was happening before then. So we need to think about what are these sectors that have the potential to create that kind of jobs. How come, with all these millions of motorbikes, we are still not assembling motorbikes here?
We don't.
We don't. These motorbikes are still coming from China or from India. All right? Why can't we say, like what Ethiopians have done, Ethiopians have done, they are going to be the biggest EV market in Africa. They don't allow these fuel guzzlers to be imported. They are building their, and we will be here talking about how Ethiopia have done this. Ethiopia have already done the dam that is giving 6,000 megawatts. We are still here talking about geothermal, talking about Menengai, talking about Naivasha, talking about all these things. But we don't have those big push. How have they done it? It's a $5 billion project. We have not done any project here that is worth $5 billion. And they went through a lot of challenges because you see they're using the upstream, Nile, Blue Nile, and Egyptians were contesting because they're in the downstream. So when Ethiopians went to the international financiers, they couldn't get the money.
So what did they do?
They mobilized their population. Everybody in diaspora, everybody in the country, all the civil servants, everybody in Ethiopia who put in money there is a shareholder of that dam.
Wait, there was no foreign investment?
No. It took a bit of time, but they raised the money themselves. They raised the money themselves. And the civil servants were asked to contribute their 2 months' salary over time. And therefore, they became the shareholders of this dam. And therefore, they did not clear blockers, blocking, the execution. And then they executed. But for you to do that, you have to carry the population with you, and they have to trust you.
Trust, yes.
Because the biggest challenge that we have in Kenya, whether it's private businesses, whether it is public-private, is that the trust currency has depreciated almost to zero. Okay? Now, if the currency is depreciated, you can't take trust. I can't tell you, look, Catherine, I need 1 million shillings, then I give it back next week. Nobody will give you. And maybe the people who are doing that better, they are Somali business people. They are able to come together and say, let us contribute 100 million. If you go to these other Ghanaians, it will be,
So, Anthony, let me just take you back a bit. And I know you're on a roll with this thought, but I want to just go back to these papers because first, just from where I sit, and I'm wearing the hat of even my audience, is first, are we addicted to just writing strategic papers for the heck of it? Like, yeah, let's do a strategic. Okay, here it is. Okay, now, okay, here is another paper. And then, yes, somebody says, okay, let's put this through AI. Here it is. So we are addicted to that, maybe, or not. 2, is our head in the clouds. When I hear Ethiopia coming together and saying, I'm going to, we have one of our, now it's a very hot political season in this country, just for our audience outside Kenya. And so politicians are starting fundraising. They're saying, even if it's 10 shillings, send it to this number. Now, when I hear Ethiopia were doing fundraising for the development of their nation, their people, their children, the generations after them, and not even just for a political cause. Because here, people will send to that political cause because maybe they believe in the leader, which is fine, fair enough. But how many will send 10 shillings because we need to, I don't know, maybe the government has said there's this project, we can't get foreign investment, Changa Pesa. How is it possible Ethiopia was able to do it? Or even Kagame's people are able to, when I say people, I mean his ministers, are able to be held to account. Like, it's not going to be rhetoric. Our cabinet meetings are not rhetoric. Is you're going to the people, and what you have reported here is what the people are also reporting. Otherwise, you're in trouble. So execution is also like, there's a scorecard. We, who pride ourselves as one of the, and you'll give me the numbers, the what something in Africa, Kenya, our name shines so bright in the West. But listening to you, as a Kenyan, You're a Kenyan. I hear what's happening in our neighboring countries who just were born the other day. And you're like, what is our problem?
I think we have, and I don't want to sound cynical, just saying, oh, things are no. But in the continuum of 1 to 10, for the things where we need to be at the moment, I focus on what has not been done. There are many people talking about what has been done, and they are paid to do that by government or by whoever.
Yeah.
That's more my, mine. I'm looking at unemployment is at 75%. So we can talk about the 15% of the people who are employed, but I am focusing on the problem, the real big, problem.
Yeah.
And now just focusing and criticizing, saying, what is it we can do? Because we are in together. We are. This is our country. We have to, And I think the challenge is that, as you said, if we have depreciated our trust, all right, you can go to the farmer and tell the farmer to give you a sack of maize to go and sell in the market and then go back and pay them. They will tell you, you pay and
take the maize.
But you can create systems. You can digitize the trust now. You create institutions that can give confidence. Let me give you an example.
Right.
When is the last time you looked at your bank statement and go line by line, looking whether the bank is taking a 50 cents or a shilling from your account and maybe doing that for everybody?
Do they?
No, I'm not saying they do. I'm saying when is the last time you took you.
I scrolled through my monthly statement.
Yes.
I hardly ever.
Why? How come you don't go to the bank and sit there, or Kenyans go to the bank and sit there and say, I want to see my money? The banks have created the trust that even if they make a mistake, and they do.
They do?
Yes. They do. But nobody checks. But in corporates, they do bank reconciliations. But because we trust them,
right,
that they are doing the right thing, we don't bother. All right? We know they have duty of care, they're doing the right, they are professional, they have computer systems, so we trust them.
Yeah.
All right? You don't look at your M-Pesa balance all the time.
Yeah.
All right? Only maybe when you have Fuliza. You don't even look at the interest rate for Fuliza.
Oh, it has an interest rate.
Of course.
Everybody.
And maybe just to be a bit, nothing to do with the Safaricom, but when we're talking about these digital loans,
right?
Some of the things that happen in some of these loans will not be accepted in places like the US because they're outright exploitative.
Like?
The interest rates goes, if you count the interest rates correctly, they go even to 1,000, 3,000%.
No.
So that is a
conversation
subject for another day. Yes.
What?
Yes. So, but because you've created trust, people borrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they made it very easy for you to borrow.
Very.
Why? They're making a killing out of it. So we can rebuild trust. And it's the onus of people who govern, whether you're governing an organization or a country or a county, onus is on you to build trust.
How do they do that?
I think where we are in a cutthroat competition. So, and that's why I separate the political market. So the political market. So I say the religious market, economic market, and the political market. The religious market, proliferation of, and you can see what Rwanda is doing, saying, look, we have to regulate this. If you don't have a degree in theology, you have no business telling people about the good book. But of course, in Kenya, we have freedom of worship.
Yeah.
All right? But here, they sell hope of going to heaven. Forget about what is happening now. You focus on going to heaven. All right? It is and also what Karl Marx in the Marxism called it the opium of the masses.
Right.
Give people religion.
Yeah.
They sleep hungry, but they are waiting to go to heaven. I'm a person. I go to church, so
Yes.
I'm there with the other Kenyans. All right. Then you go to the political market. Political market is very important because political market is what decides the policies. All right? Because politics come from a Greek word called polity. It is Kenya is a polity, or county is a polity. So the politics and policy, they go together.
Okay.
All right? So for the people who say, I don't like politics, those are what Greeks called idiotes, because they only cared about themselves. And idiotis or idiot is not a bad name. It's just you're focusing on your own enclave. All right?
Okay.
I'm not bothered about, I don't like politics. But you don't know that actually politics is what drives everything else. Because politics drives policy. So if you get it wrong in the political market, and here the problem is, anything goes, anybody can say anything. So it is for the citizens to be able to shift through clutter, to know who is saying what and what is real and what is fantasy. Greeks never allowed people, that's why they talked about the philosopher king. They never allowed people who have not gone to a certain level of education to participate in a democratic process. Okay? Because they know that making a choice of leadership is such a big responsibility that is not supposed to be taken by people who are not educated about that choice. Because remember, this is what we call democracy. Is two words from Greek.
Okay.
Because these are Greek words.
Yes.
Demo plus cracy. Demo, that's why you go for demonstrations. What is demonstrations? Demonstrations is because all of us go out to agitate what we want. So democracy is a rule by mob. Because demo is mob. Rule by mob. And the rule by mob is given fancy words that say universal suffrage. After 18 years, an 18-year-old has the same rights as a professor. So when you're deciding the leadership, the professor will take, or people who are educated will take different frameworks to assess. But you have also people who don't have that knowledge. That's why Greeks never allowed people who are not at a certain level to participate in this democratic process. So that you make informed decision. So Nairobi, look at Nairobi. Nairobi controls a huge chunk of the economy of the country.
Yes.
It's a global city. Okay? But 67-70% of Nairobi is informal settlements. Okay? What you see here is deceiving. So when you come to elect a leader, who do you think will carry the day? Look at the leadership you've got from, with the exception of the first leadership of Nairobi that disappointed, because all of us, even the people who were not in that political formation, voted for the first governor because it's a PhD, you know.
Yes.
Right?
I had to remember. Yeah. Yes.
But look at successful governments. What do we get? Is that the representative of the best? If this controls almost 40-50% of the GDP, these are global capital. But look at the leadership that we get. Why? because of this rule by mob. The mob decides who will be their leader, and they elect their own.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a problem. And that's why Chinese, and I'm not saying that is a better system. We have to be, we're just saying, they actually say democracy is the worst form of government, only that others have not worked.
Oh.
But it's the worst.